All right, everybody, get ready, because today we're diving into something really different.
Yeah, this one's pretty out there.
We're looking at this Murli from October 22nd, 2024, and honestly, it's unlike any spiritual text I've ever explored before.
It's really unique, that's for sure.
Forget like the typical meditation stuff. This is more like, I don't know, soul school.
That's actually a really good comparison. What's so fascinating about this Murli is how it positions itself as a school
Okay, a school for what, though?
for your soul. It's not about becoming a doctor or a lawyer, you know the usual stuff. It's about this journey your soul takes to become, and I'm using their words here, deity-like.
Okay, deity-like. Now you're speaking my language. That sounds intense.
It's powerful stuff. And what's interesting is it's not about some quick magic solution. It really emphasizes knowledge and purity, like actual work.
No shortcuts, huh?
Nope, none whatsoever. It lays out this whole structured process of learning, of purification. It directly challenges the idea that enlightenment, or whatever you want to call it, is just this random thing that kind of falls into your lap.
You're saying becoming deity-like is something we can actually work towards actively.
Absolutely. We aren't just wandering around hoping for the best. And to explain this, the Murli uses this really interesting metaphor: batteries.
Batteries, like Duracell, Energizer.
You got it. Picture this. Deities. They're like those supercharged batteries, just radiating pure energy. Humans, well, we're like those old corroded batteries you find in the back of the junk drawer, completely drained.
You're saying we're walking around with dead batteries inside. No wonder we all feel so depleted all the time. What happened to our charge, so to speak?
Well, the way this Murli explains it, we've lost touch with our inherent spiritual energy, our virtue, over time.
So that divine spark everyone talks about is more like a dying ember at this point.
Yeah, kind of. It's like it's been neglected, dormant for who knows how long.
Okay, so how do we even begin to recharge these metaphorical batteries? This is where the whole school thing comes back in, right?
This is where it gets really, really interesting. The Murli positions God, Shiva specifically, as the ultimate teacher in this soul school.
Hold on a minute. We're not talking about a god with, like, a literal chalkboard and lesson plans, are we?
Not at all. It's made very clear that he doesn't carry some physical book or anything, even though the scriptures, things like the Gita, are considered his versions, if that makes sense.
So less about memorizing a bunch of rules and more about embodying the knowledge directly.
Exactly. Living it, breathing it, not just reading about it.
Okay, I'm with you so far. So if God is the teacher in this soul school, what's the curriculum even like?
Well, buckle up, because the Murli throws a bit of a curveball. It presents this whole concept of the world being a predestined movie, and that's where things get really wild.
Wait a second, predestined, like, are you saying free will is off the table?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? This movie metaphor suggests the cycle of time, everything from the Golden Age to right now, which, let's be honest, feels more like the Iron Age some days. All of this is part of a film that's already been made, start to finish.
Hold up, you're saying, like, no rewinds, no edits.
It seems that way, yeah.
But then what's the point of learning and growing if everything's already decided? That's kind of a downer, don't you think?
I can see why you'd think that, but that's where things get really fascinating. This idea, as strange as it sounds, actually opens up a whole other level of understanding about our role in all of this. And honestly, it's way more empowering than you might think.
Okay, now you've got me on the edge of my seat. You'll have to tell us more after the break. All right, so we're back, and we left off with this whole mind-blowing concept of the world being like a movie that's already been made, right? Like no rewinds, no edits. How does that even work if we're supposed to be learning and growing as souls?
Yeah, it's a real head scratcher, isn't it? But this is where the Murli takes this really interesting turn. It's suggesting that true freedom isn't about changing the events of this movie, but about changing our internal response to those events.
So not about getting a different role or like rewriting the script, but more about how we play the role we've been given.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the patterns of this world drama, you know, the ups and downs, and choosing to act from a place of wisdom rather than getting totally swept up in all the drama and emotions.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually do that?
Yeah.
How do we rise above all the noise and actually tap into that wisdom?
Well, this is where the concept of Satipradhan comes in. Remember how we were talking about those like dead, drained batteries earlier? Well, Satipradhan is like plugging into this like universal power source. It's about getting back to that state of pure, clear, spiritual energy that the Murli emphasizes.
So cultivating Satipradhan is like ditching those old busted batteries and plugging into something infinitely more powerful.
You got it. And the Murli makes this really interesting comparison between this power of silence and the power of science.
So it's not that science is inherently bad or anything, but it's more like a different way of engaging with the world.
Exactly. Science can be amazing for helping us understand and manipulate the physical world, right? But this silence, this inner silence, that connects us to a much deeper power within.
The kind of power that can actually help us deal with the root causes of suffering. Because if I'm understanding this correctly, the Murli's saying that suffering ultimately comes from this disconnect from our true, fully charged selves, right?
Right on. And the million-dollar question is, how do we actually do that? How do we access that inner silence, that Sanaprajna state, in a practical way? It's not like flipping a switch. Or is it?
Okay, now you've got me really intrigued. What's the secret?
Well, the good news is the Murli actually offers some really practical tools for achieving exactly that. But we'll need to dive into those after a quick break. Stay tuned.
All right, so we're back. And before the break, we were talking about this powerful idea of Sotapradhan, this state of pure energy that's available to us. But how do we actually get there? How do we tap into that?
So remember those like ravenistic tendencies we talked about before? Those vices, the greed, anger, all that stuff that just drains our energy? The Murli actually gives some really practical things we can do to overcome those. And it all comes back to that power of silence we were talking about.
Okay, but we're not talking about just like finding a quiet room and putting on noise-canceling headphones, right? This is about something deeper.
Deeper. It's about this deep inner stillness, like a way to connect to that Satipradhan state, that purity, that clarity. And one of the biggest ways the Murli talks about doing this is through yoga.
Yoga, like downward dog, sun salutations, all that.
Not exactly. The kind of yoga this Murli's talking about, it's less about the physical poses and more about an internal connection. And specifically, it's about connecting with the divine. It even uses this phrase, having yoga with the Almighty Authority Father, which I love.
So it's about fostering that one-on-one relationship with the divine. That's pretty intense.
It really is. And it suggests that through that connection, through that inner yoga, we can actually start to loosen the grip of those vices, those ravenistic tendencies that kind of keep us stuck, you know?
So it's like we're rewiring our internal circuitry or something, replacing those old habits with something way more positive and powerful.
Yeah, exactly. And this brings us back to that whole predestined movie idea. We might not be able to like change the events of the movie itself, but through these practices, through inner yoga, through cultivating Satipradhan, we can totally change how we experience it.
So like, even though the script's already written, we actually have more control than we think. We get to choose how we react to the challenges, the drama, all of it.
That's the key right there. And honestly, that's incredibly empowering. It means even in a world that might seem predetermined, we have the ability to become conscious actors, making choices that are in line with our true, fully charged selves.
Wow. So it's not about like becoming superhuman or somehow escaping all the ups and downs of life. It's more about finding that inner strength to navigate it all with more, I don't know, grace, more awareness.
You nailed it. And remember, this whole Satipradhan thing, it's not a one-and-done deal. The Murli even compares it to charging a battery. We need to actively keep plugging into that source, that inner silence, to keep our spiritual energy high.
So it's an ongoing journey, a constant practice of learning, growing, and really connecting with that divine spark we've been talking about. And it all starts with those small steps, right? Like actively cultivating that inner silence and remembering that even when the world feels crazy and predetermined, we have way more agency than we think.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, there you have it, folks. It seems we've reached the end of our deep dive into this fascinating Murli Craw. We've covered a lot of ground, from soul school to predestined movies to the power of silence. But like with any good deep dive, this is really just the beginning. We encourage you to take these ideas, maybe revisit the text yourself, and see what resonates with you. Until next time, keep asking those big questions and keep exploring.